Up until now, we've been connecting to cisdbss.pcc.edu, which is an instance of the Microsoft SQL Server database. And you can continue doing that, but you might also want to create your own copy of the database running locally on your machine. And this is useful if, for example, the network is down and you still want to be able to access the database, or if you want to create your own database, or if you want to modify the database. So right now you have limited permission on FiredUp in cisdbss, but if you make your own copy, then you can do whatever you want to it. So I'm going to show you how to start up a local instance of SQL and how to create your own copy of the FiredUp database. Now, the first thing you want to do is open a command prompt. So I'm just going to search for CMD and open this up. And from the command line, I'm going to type SQLLocalDB and hit return. And if you get a bunch of text coming back with instructions, that means you have SQLLocalDB installed on your machine already. And this is bundled with some of the downloads that we grabbed at the beginning of the year, but not all of them. So if you type SQLLocalDB in a command prompt and you get an error message that it can't find SQLLocalDB, you're going to need another download. And let me show you where that is. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the browser window. And I'm on the 275 homepage. I'm going to go to the Content tab, and I'm going to open in Lesson 1, installing SQL Server Management Studio. So this was something you did in week 1. And I'm going to go to this link. So here's a download for Microsoft SQL Server 2014 Express. We'll select English. And then the one you want for SQLLocalDB is the small one. So this one right here, SQLLocalDB.msi 43.1 megabytes. If you don't have it already, you can just go ahead and click and download it now. But I already have it installed, so I'm not going to go ahead and install it. So if you do have SQLLocalDB installed, we're going to want to create an instance of the database, and then we're going to want to start it. So let's see how that works. So first thing I'm going to do is SQLLocalDB info, and this shows me, whoops, I left out an L here. So SQLLocalDB info, and this shows me all of the instances I have installed. And this one's installed by default. I want to create a new instance, SQLLocalDB create, and then I'm going to give it a name. And I'll just use my name here, MARC. So that took a little while. And then I'm going to rerun the info command. And now I have two instances. I have the default one and I have this new one I just created. So the next step is, now that I have it, I want to start it. SQLLocalDB start, and then I give it the name of the instance, Mark. And that's really all there is to it, to starting up the instance. So I'm going to pull up SQL Server Management Studio, and let's see how to connect to it. So I'm going to go to this Connect tab and connect to Database Engine. And for server name, I'm going to say open paren localdb close paren / Mark. And it's very important that you have this capitalization exactly the same. So localdb in lowercase with open paren, close paren around it, a /, and then the instance name exactly same capitalization as you had when you created the instance. For authentication, we're going to use Windows authentication, and that means that we're going to log in with our current account, so you don't need to specify username or password. And then I'm going to hit connect. And if this is what you see, then everything is working. This means that I've connected to my local instance. And if I open the Databases tab, I don't really have anything. I just have the system databases that track the metadata. I don't have any other databases yet. So the next step is I'm going to want to create a new database. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to connect to cisdbss in a different SQL Server Management Studio window. So I'm going to have two separate SQL Server Management Studios open. One is going to be connected to cisdbss, and the other one is going to be connected to my local instance. And that's going to keep SQL Server Management Studio from getting confused as to which database it's connected to. So for this one, I'm going to change the drop-down to cisdbss. I'm going to use SQL Server Authentication, type in the password, login and password 275 student and 275 student, and then connect. Okay, so now I'm connected to cisdbss over here and to LocalDB over there. If I open databases, here's the FiredUp database right here. So how do I get this thing over here? Well, I'm going to show you how to do a SQL extract of this database and then import that over here. So export from here, import over here. First, I'm going to right-click on FiredUp, and then under Tasks, I'm going to select Generate Scripts, and I'm going to step through this. So take the default here. For Choose Objects, I'm going to just select the tables. That's all I need here. Next. And then I have to make one change here. So I'm going to go to Advanced, and then towards the bottom here, right above where it says Table View Options, it says Types of Data to Script. And by default, this is set to Schema only. So schema is what the tables are and the columns and the types of the columns and all that other stuff, but none of the actual data, none of the rows in the database tables. So I want to click on this, and from the drop-down, select both schema and data. So this will give me a copy of all of the table columns and tables, and will also give me all the rows in the tables. So say OK. Now, by default, it's going to save the export in a file called script.sql in my documents directory. And I can either leave that default or I can change where it's going. I'm going to go ahead and just take the default here and say Next, Next, and now it's actually generating the dump. So not too bad. I'm going to go Finish. So I'm going to go back to my local database instance and say File, Open, File. And I'm going to go to my Documents folder and find script.sql, which is right here. And this is a series of SQL statements that when executed will actually create the database. So it starts by creating some tables. So here it's creating the customer table and defining some columns. And here it's creating the email table and the employee table and so on. So all the tables for the FiredUp database. And then a little further down, there's a bunch of insert statements that actually insert the rows of data. So here it's inserting the customer data, and then email, and employees, and so on. But before I can execute this set of SQL commands, I need to make one change. So the first line here, it's using the FiredUp database, and then the rest of these commands are going to apply to the FiredUp database. But I don't actually have a FiredUp database yet. So I need to create that before I can execute this script. And I'm just going to edit this script in place here. So I'm going to add a line, create database FiredUp, and then go. So this first line is what actually creates the database in the server, and then the second line, this go, that says execute this transaction and commit the changes so that it become visible from here on down. And that should be all I need to do. So let's go ahead and execute. Good. So if it says one row affected and so on, that means you're in good shape. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new query file, and I'm going to say use FiredUp, select star from customer, and then I'm going to execute that. And I get my data back, just like if I was connected to cisdbss. So that's really all you need to do to create your own copy of the FiredUp database. And if you wanted to create your own database with your own columns, you could write a SQL file that would create that data.